What are we talking about today? Today we're talking about Greninja, one of the most versatile special attacking Pokemon in the game. Episode 3 of how the fuck do I beat this? How the fuck do I beat this shit? Overall, its main set hasn't changed very dramatically, outside of just adapting to counters that have started to appear, like running HP Grass for Rotom W, for example, and HP Fire for Ferrothorn. But right now, the current common moves that Greninja tends to carry include stuff like Extra Sensory to keep Keldeo from being switched in. Ice Beam and a Water Stab move have always been staples, with Hydro Pump being the preferred Water Stab nowadays just for the extra power. Some more common moves that Greninja might run against you are Grass Knot, particularly for things like for Tyranitar. Gyarados, especially Mega Gyarados, is something that can usually safely set up on Greninja, and that's why they tend to run Grass Knot. And also, like I said, HP Fire for Scizor, Ferrothorn, and even HP Grass for stuff like Azumarill and Rotom W to keep them from switching in. Dark Pulse is something that has kind of grown out of use just because it gives a lot of general neutral coverage, but it doesn't really cover anything that Greninja can hit super effectively, or that it needs to hit super effectively. You know, things like Mew that can't really do much to it anyway. So for these reasons, Greninja tends to be a Pokemon that can be hard to deal with because it's very fast, it has a ton of coverage, it has considerable power considering every one of its moves is going to get a stab boost essentially. And it's just overall a complete nightmare for offensive teams that tend to rely on speed, burn, and intimidate to deal with offensive Pokemon. And you know, Greninja is a special attacking Pokemon, so it's not going to care about burn or intimidate. So in order for your offensive team to be a little bit more successful, you're going to need something to deal with this thing. A very common way to take out Greninja is Powerful Priority. Greninja is kind of a glass cannon. It's pretty frail. It'll die to even resisted hits, like +2 Bisharp Sucker Punch after the Stealth Rocks. Talonflame is usually a pretty good check to it. It obviously can't switch into a Water type move, but it can force it out with a Priority Brave Bird that pretty much negates Greninja's high speed. Another thing that can really ruin Greninja is Mega Manectric. Not only is it not really hit super effectively by any of Greninja's attacks, it has good bulk and it's faster than it. And it can severely dent it with a Stab Thunderbolt if Greninja hasn't used Protean yet, or it can just Volt Switch out. Yeah, Mega Manectric is a very great asset to balanced and offense teams alike because it provides Intimidate, and it checks Bird Spam, it checks Thundurus, and it checks Greninja. Assault Vest Raikou kind of falls into the same boat, doesn't give quite as much utility as Mega Manectric due to its much lower defense and lack of Intimidate. However, it has greater special bulk, doesn't give up a Mega Slot, and has pretty comparable power with the extra coverage of moves like Shadow Ball and Extra Sensory, although it does miss out on Flamethrower, which Mega Manectric has access to. Scouting is also a really good technique to use when facing a Greninja. Typically, Ferrothorn is a pretty good switch in. However, HP Fire has become common, so make sure you carry Protect on your Ferrothorn to scout for HP Fire. And you always gotta remember that Greninja only has 4 move slots, so if your opponent reveals a move like HP Fire, chances are it's not gonna have Grass Knot, and it's definitely not gonna have HP Grass. So that's an indicator. If you have something like a Fire Water Core, or Fire Water Grass Core, with your Ferrothorn and your Rotom Wash, you can switch in your Ferrothorn, use Protect to scout for HP Fire, and if it does indeed reveal HP Fire, then that's an indicator that you can safely switch in your Rotom W later, even if it's not geared towards the special defense. It's a lot easier for defensive teams to handle Greninja just because it lacks really it has enough power to just break the offensive threats, but not quite enough to truly wall break, especially because a lot of Pokemon Assault teams aren't really hit super effectively by a lot of Greninja's moves. Clefable is an option that is really useful for balanced and defensive teams in handling Greninja. Its typing is amazing and doesn't get hit by any of Greninja's moves super effectively. Although you do need to run a little bit of special defense to avoid the 2-hit KO from Hydro Pump. But in general, if you have the right EV spread, Clefable can just use Greninja as setup fodder. It's pretty brilliant, as Clefable, despite its subpar stats, is actually one of the most dangerous Pokemon in the game. An obvious pick right here is Chansey. It'll take anything Greninja wants to throw at it, including the rare physical ones, just because they don't really tend to be all that powerful. Pokemon like Mega Venusaur, you know, you're not going to see an HP flying Greninja. However, you will see extra sensory. But again, it's a problem that can be easily solved by simply switching out to scout the move. You switch in your Mega Venusaur, but you suspect extra sensory. You know, switch back out to your Heatran or whatever. And if it uses, because it's not going to use Hydro Pump on Venusaur, obviously, but you can switch out into Heatran temporarily. If it uses Ice Beam, you can always go back into your Venusaur. If it uses extra sensory, then you're gonna have to find some other solution. You're gonna either have a Chansey of your team, you have Clefable on your team, something like that. You gotta have something on defensive teams for all Greninja sets, no matter what. Otherwise, while it doesn't really threaten to sweep you, obviously, because it doesn't have enough power, it can punch holes for other members of the team. You know, you can't go losing your Mega Venusaur to an extra sensory Greninja, because then they're like Keldeo or the Resumro can come in later, and they'll be the ones putting in the hurt. And you know, that might sound strange, but it's really not uncommon to have teams with water stacking, especially something like Greninja that's not going to permanently stay as a water type. It's going to be utilizing Protean. And water all around is a excellent type that your opponent can afford to stack. So just be careful of being overwhelmed by certain cores involving Greninja, including Greninja Kira Me, Greninja Dragonite, Greninja, or just Greninja Dragon plus Theo. I've also seen Greninja plus Clefable. So oftentimes, especially against more balanced teams, Greninja's goal isn't to sweep your team, it's to open up holes for other Pokemon. And a lot of the time you can look at the opponent's team and identify what kind of coverage Greninja needs to run to punch holes for that Pokemon. So a lot of the times right off team preview, you can sort of tell what moves Greninja is likely to have. For example, if your opponent is also utilizing a, let's say, a Mega Scizor, and we know it doesn't have superpower, then it's very likely that Greninja has HP Fire instead. So that's one example. Or if your opponent has both Keldeo and Greninja, then you can probably expect that Greninja to have extra sensory. So just things like that making analysis like that right from team preview can help your team deal with Greninja a lot better during the battle. It is not a powerful Pokemon, or it's not a Pokemon with wall-breaking power by any means, but it's something that's just powerful enough and fast enough to be a real threat to balance and offense in particular. And I hope the examples I provided in the video can help you better prepare for Greninja. A lot of these options are pretty simple to just slap onto a team. You know, Clefables. It's just pretty hard for Clefable not to do well on a team. It's hard for Mega Manectric to not do well on a team. Ferrothorn always pulls its weight. Raikou needs a little bit more team support, but generally that can work too. Offensive Mega Venusaur is starting to become a thing on balanced teams, so that's not a hard Pokemon to work on your team as long as you have checks to stuff like Bird Spam. So that's all I have to say. Greninja is a threat in the current metagame where water types and ground types are easy to spam, and Greninja is a water type and it beats ground types, so it's a really good Pokemon in today's meta, especially because it's so fast and it has the power to back up that speed, you know. and just the right move pool. And it can adapt to things that would otherwise be its checks. Especially because like hidden power is so viable on Greninja because it turns into that type. So you go from having a paltry 60 base power move into having a 90 power base move because it's gaining stab from the move thanks to Protean. And that's all I have to say about Greninja. It's a threat. Hopefully this video helps you prepare for it. If you ever have any trouble with it, then you can use the examples I listed and hopefully work them onto your team somehow. And that's all I have for today.